Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day it is. Welcome to another episode of MarketHer. Yay!
Woo!
I am Angela Martinez.
I'm Britt Schwartz.
I'm Bree Ringhell.
And guess what, guys? We have a special guest today. And we are so excited to have her here. We have an interesting story of how we found her. But I want to give the opportunity for Christine, you to introduce yourself and a little bit about why you're here today.
Yeah, so my name is Christina Bakish. I am here today to talk about mental health and just kind of a little bit of my background. So I was first diagnosed when I was 14. I had just moved to Florida and I didn't know anyone, and I found myself just sad. Like, I went from this happy, excited teenager to just being sad. And, it kind of was overlooked at first because that's just what teenagers do. They kind of get sad. They get rebellious, like it's just what happens. But it got to the point where it was just overwhelming, and my teachers started taking notice and classmates started taking notice, and eventually a guidance counselor was like, I think you really need to go and have an evaluation done. And I went there and they diagnosed me with depression and anxiety, and I started medication and I started therapy for that. Years went by and I kind of lived a relatively normal life. The medications, they worked a little bit, but sometimes they didn't, and I never really thought anything of it. I kind of just lived my life and I just went on with things. And actually over the summer, I started feeling really sad again. And I had a lot of trouble working. I couldn't focus during the day. I was tired all the time. I was just really sad. I would start crying. Like, I'm writing a blog and I just start crying. It's like, why are you crying, Christina? What's going on? You're writing a blog.
Right.
And that's when I kind of started to realize something was wrong. And my boss was actually the one who pointed it out to me. She's like, look, you're not yourself anymore. Like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. And she was the one who encouraged me to actually go back to a doctor and to kind of get things looked at again. And when I did, he's like, you know what? I think the reason those medications never worked for you is not because you have depression, but because you're bipolar.
Oh, wow.
And it was this like, what? Like, I actually was in denial. I was like, no, I do not have bipolar disorder. You're wrong.
Right.
But when I started taking medications for that, actually within a couple weeks, I started to feel better. Mm-hmm. And what I've learned throughout the past 13, 14 years is that mental health really isn't talked about. People are afraid to kind of talk about it, and especially at work. No one wants to bring it up. No one wants to talk about it. But if my boss didn't have that conversation with me, I know for a fact that things would be very different right now for me. So yeah. I think it's such an important topic, and I'm really excited to be here today to actually talk about it and kind of share my experiences and share my tips for both employers and, leaders.
Awesome. You have an interesting story with Britt. So I reached out to you on Twitter, not knowing the two of you had known each other. Yeah. Because I read your bio. I thought it was really interesting. The reason why we wanted to bring you on the show is to talk about mental health and bipolar disorder, presumably in the workplace, because like you said, we don't talk about it often. No one really knows how to deal with it. And we want to give a platform and kind of start this discussion. But I would really love, because I know that Britt has changed and has learned and has grown from your experience working together. So I want to just have Britt kind of talk about that experience and that time of you two working together and what she was taken with her and why she's an excellent leader today based on your experience. And I would just love to have you guys go back and forth on that a little bit.
Definitely.
Yeah.
You want to start it off?
Sure. Angela, first, thank you for calling me an excellent leader.
Yeah.
There's definitely days I don't feel like it, but that's quite a compliment coming from you. On the flip side of that coin, I have written a number of personal blogs that have started with, I used to be a bad word boss. I used to be a crappy boss. And Christina and I, we've worked together, oh my gosh, it was 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yeah.
It was a smaller agency we were both a part of. Christina was brought in to help support when I went on maternity leave, when I had my son. And I was really excited. There was another woman in the office. At the time, we were mainly male dominated. And Christina, from my perspective, we hit it off really well. We both loved barbecue. We would wear the same clothes. I didn't really recognize any sort of, I think, discord until things changed a little bit and I moved into a leadership role. Now, it was my very first leadership role, and I was so bad at it. Oh my gosh, I didn't know what I was
Aren't
doing.
we all?
I didn't know what I was doing. And part of it was just I needed experience. But the other part of it is that I started recognizing, I think, some of what you're sharing that your boss currently now saw. But in my inexperience and not knowing what's going on, I don't know that I led you or supported you in the best way.
Mm-hmm. So what was the difference between a new leader kind of guiding you and giving you that experience, and what happened with your boss now, and how did she bring it up, and how does she support you in that, and what made you wake up and say, well, you know what, she's right?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the time when, Britt and I were working together, I just really wasn't comfortable talking about it. I felt really ashamed and embarrassed, and I was really afraid to bring it up because what I didn't want her to look down on me and think that I couldn't do my job because of it. And I think that's what a lot of people feel. Like, who wants anyone to look down on you, and especially when there is that stigma around it. And for me now, I think just getting older, I've written blogs about it, and I think that was really helpful. And I kind of just knew like anyone could find it online. So if anyone can find it online, why not just be a little bit more open about it at work? And I was kind of the one who actually brought it up first with my boss. There had been a period where I wasn't sleeping like at all. I think I was getting like 2 hours of sleep a night, and this went on for months. Wow. And finally I was like, wait, what is going on? And I realized that was the same thing that happened when I was first diagnosed. And so I had mentioned it to my boss. I was like, I think that I'm depressed again. I think that that's what's going on. And so when she brought it up, it had kind of been that my work was suffering. And she's like, is there something going on? Is there something that we can do to help you? And it wasn't like, you have a mental illness, there's something wrong with you. It was, your work is suffering. What's going on? How can we help you? And that was kind of when I really opened up about it, because I didn't feel like she was attacking my mental illness. I didn't feel like she was attacking me. I felt like she wanted to have a conversation about it. And that was really valuable to me. And I think that's what really employers and leaders can do, is just, you have to be really careful how you bring it up, and, don't attack someone. Recognize that everyone's going to be, have different levels of comfort and that sort of thing. And just ask what you can do to help. And I think that's like the really, really big thing.
I would say, Christina, that's so powerful, even if we're talking about someone with a diagnosed mental illness versus just someone who's totally overwhelmed. I look back at our time together, and though I didn't know the struggle that you were having and why you were having it, what I didn't do is I didn't approach the situation with empathy. I didn't give you a platform to even feel comfortable. It was, this work has to get done, and why isn't it getting, you're like, I recognize this conversation. Why isn't it getting done? And a lot of that is coming from the inexperience, right? But also the thing that I have taken with me from my experience working with you, even before you were very open about your bipolar disorder, it's something that I've carried for the years since working with you as a regret / try to do better, is if someone's struggling, if I see someone on my team or somebody that's even, I don't lead, but that's just next to me, is offering a level of empathy and saying, work is important. That's how we all get paid. I get it. But from one human to another, I do regret that I was not as prepared or willing to offer that to you at that time, to say, as one human to another, what's going on? Because clearly, Christina, you were struggling with something, and I was so determined to get work done that now, today, thanks in large part to you, when I approach situations, I'm not perfect at it. Nobody is. But there's this undertone of empathy that I hope would create a situation that your boss today has created for you.
Yeah, I'd be curious, we talk about empathy, and I think as an inexperienced manager or in general, if you think that your work's not getting done, I wouldn't necessarily jump to a conclusion that they must have a diagnosed mental illness. Like, I don't know. So what would be your advice, Christine, if that was the answer? Like, I think that probably my first reaction would be like, oh crap, what do I say now? Like, I think that people don't know how to talk about it because we never talk about this in the workplace. So what would you advise somebody, to really anybody on the video here, like, what do you do in that moment?
I think it's okay to say, I don't know how to react. I would rather someone be honest and be like, I have never dealt with this before. I have no idea how to help you. I have no idea what to ask. Like, I'd rather someone be honest with me than assume they know or try to like make things up as they go. And, you know, everyone has their own levels of comfort on what they're willing to talk about, but, you know, start asking some questions, see how comfortable they are talking about it. You know, if you see that they're not really ready to talk about it, just kind of like back off and stuff like that. But, you know, ask those questions. I would rather someone ask me a million questions about what I experience and what I go through than just assume that they have any sort of knowledge and experience, because I think that's more detrimental than anything.
The one thing that I read in this Forbes article, and I can attach it to the show notes because it provides a lot of really good information on what you can do, but it says what you should not do is try to be a therapist.
Yes.
Because it makes people feel like you're talking down to them, or makes them feel like you know more about, you know, something that you know nothing about. So how would you, you know, feel about somebody acting as though they're, you know, being your therapist and giving you advice where it's really not their place?
I think it's kind of a tough, you know, it's a tough balance, because you want to offer that support and you want to help them through it, but you're right, you can't really act as my therapist. You know, only my therapist can do that. And I think the way that you can do that is just to be supportive. You know, tell people you matter. I care about you. I support you. I will be there for you. You're not alone. Things like that are more helpful to me than trying to give me advice, because that's kind of where you start to say the wrong thing. And it's nothing that, you know, it's not like you're a bad person for doing it. It's just you don't know what to say.
We're not equipped.
You just kind of go around it and you're like, oh my gosh, now I'm saying like all the wrong things. So I've had people do that and they're like, I'm so sorry. And I get that. So I think just what you can do is just, you know, be encouraging and remind them that you're there for them, and actually be there if they reach out, because they might not, but they might do it when they're really in a dark place. So just be supportive without trying to give too much advice.
So go ahead, Bree.
I'm just curious. Like you mentioned earlier that before you were ashamed, you didn't really want to confront this. I guess it sounds like there was a perfect alignment between like when you actually were feeling a little bit more open and ready and you were recognizing it yourself versus, you know, at the same time, that's when your supervisor talked to you about it. What would you give advice to a leader, or even just someone going through it, if you're not quite ready to talk about it, but it's kind of you're being forced to talk about it? How can we help in that situation and create a better environment so you don't feel like you're being outed at work, but you got to figure out the problems at work?
Yeah, I mean, if you're someone who's going through it and you're not really ready to talk about it, you know, be honest about it. You can say like, hey, I am going through something tough, but I'm just not really ready to talk about it yet. And I think that's a perfectly acceptable answer. And as a leader, you know, it's totally frustrating to like not get what you're looking for. But I think that just to be understanding that everyone's comfort levels are different. Everyone is in kind of a different place. And so you kind of have to like walk a fine line. And I think it's one of those things that you almost don't even know how to handle until you're in it. And you kind of have to just kind of assess the situation and then see how conversation moves along.
Yeah.
A fine line too in the laws as well. And I don't know if you've done some research on that or can provide some resources on that, but once you tell your company that you have a mental disorder, that you've been diagnosed for it, they cannot fire you for that based upon performance. So is there anything that you can say to somebody who's, you know, scared and nervous to have that conversation, but also scared and nervous to be fired for the level of performance that they're able to give when they're going through those moments? Have you done some research on that? And can you talk a little bit about, you know, any advice that you have around that?
Yeah, I've definitely done some research, because I know that was what I was really nervous about. I was worried that if I opened up about it, that, you know, they would be like, oh, well, you have a mental illness, so then you can't be productive in the workplace. And just know that you are protected by laws. And I don't have all the specifics, so I can't, you know, give you like legal advice here or anything like that. But just know that if you come out and you say that you have a mental illness, that it is okay, and don't be ashamed of it. And I mean, you have to recognize everyone's comfort levels are different, and you have to recognize that sometimes not everyone is accepting, because there is still that stigma. But I would really encourage people to at least, talk to their bosses about it and have an open conversation, because that's when you really find out how to make things better. Because especially if your performance is hurting, like mine was, where I was missing deadlines, I was dropping the ball, I was forgetting to do things. And, I'm very thankful my boss was so accepting, but if you're open about it, people are usually more willing to work with you. So just don't be scared to come out and say it, but at the same time, I can totally understand why people are.
As a leader, when you're faced with those things happening, right? Missed deadlines and work not getting done, then are these two reactions, right? It's frustration because it needs to get done. But if we were to, as leaders, challenge ourselves and each other to always approach it, to try to dig deeper, we may not be able to address all of them, right? We're not therapists. We may not be able to understand because of different comfort levels. But I know for me, just understanding that there's something going on besides I just don't want to do my work is really, really all I need at that moment, right?
Yeah.
Like, you not care, or is there something going on, could be enough to alert me to understand that there's more than what I don't know. Right. And the other piece, Christina, I've known you for years now, and I've known you personally, I've known you professionally, I've watched you grow, I've watched you move from this person who was so ashamed, and looking back, seeing you carry the burden of it to yourself, to now, I am so incredibly proud to see you and to watch you talk about this, and you very open that it's still an ongoing thing, right? I don't think you ever reached this place where you've had it all figured out. If you could share with our MarketHer listeners, if there's somebody themselves who have this or have a mental illness, or they work with somebody, what are things that you found help you keep that balance between work, life, and your mental health?
For me, the biggest thing was setting boundaries. And I know you guys recently did an episode about like wearing that badge of honor of working long hours and night and weekends and all that stuff. And that was something that, at least for me, very recently, I was doing a lot of. I was working long hours. I was, I would start work at 5 a.m. and I wouldn't finish till 10 p.m. And I felt like I had to do that to prove myself because of my mental illness. And I felt like if I didn't work those hours, my boss wouldn't appreciate me. She wouldn't see the value. And she's not that kind of person at all. But that was what, that's what I felt. And that's what I was thinking. And if you're going through this and you're probably doing the same thing, like, you don't have to do that. You can set those boundaries and take that time for yourself. And that's been a really big thing for me. You absolutely have to. And that was even 2018.
We didn't even touch on that in the episode. I think that's such an important part, like your mental health, and that, we were looking at it more from like typical mental health, like take your breaks and blah, blah, blah. But like this is critical advice that you're giving right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you have to. And like, that's been my big thing in 2018 was I really wanted to set those boundaries. And so now by 6 p.m. every day, I stop working. I've done what I can do. I've done the best I can. I shut my computer and I don't think about work for the rest of the day. And there are days where it is tough. There are days where I'm like, oh my gosh, I just have a million more things to do. Like, I still have got work to do, but you have to make the time for yourself and you have to put yourself first. And I know that's really tough because for me, like, I put myself last in everything, but you have to take that time for yourself and you have to give yourself time to recover. And that is really a big thing. And so for me, just setting those boundaries, but also, taking mental health days, I think there've been a lot of articles lately about, take that time for yourself, but we always think of vacation as I got to go somewhere, I have to do something. Right. But, every couple months, if you have the opportunity, take a day off just to take care of yourself so that you can recharge and you can be the best you can be.
It's good to take a mental break too, because my son has mild ADHD and we've been struggling with it for a long time. And we have to make him take mental breaks, from iPads and devices and schoolwork and things of that nature, just to get him kind of recentered. So I think that mental health as its form and in many different diagnoses, I think it's important to, mention that, it's important to take a break and stop doing what you're doing. The one thing that I wanted to ask too, and I think might be helpful for our audience, is now that you've kind of gone through that transition and you've kind of come clean, so to speak, with your boss, how do you feel today versus how you felt before that? Like, what's changed in your work environment?
I feel so much better. I feel so supported. And every single thing that I do, I feel like I can be open and honest. And it's not just my boss who knows, all my coworkers know as well. And it makes me feel good, because if I'm having a bad day, I can say I'm having a bad day, and I can be open and honest about that. And I don't feel like I have to hide. I don't feel like I have to overcompensate. I can just say, you know what, today was a really tough day mentally, and I just need to like take the afternoon off. And sometimes, there's still work that has to get done. So I'll like make it up at another time. But just being able to be open and honest about it, it's such a relief, because I don't feel like I have to hide. I don't feel like, when I publish a new blog on my website, that I have to, keep it to myself. Like, I can post it on Facebook. I can share it with the team. And they support me. They support my recovery. They support my treatment. They support me being here today talking about this. Like, I told them about it and they're all excited. So it's
Hi,
just,
Christina's team.
hi. So it's just awesome that, I can do that. And I will say, I started there almost a year ago, and from then till now, like it's such a difference. And I'm so thankful to have a team that's so supportive of me.
I think sorry, Britt, I think that's an interesting aspect too of teammates. So like, as a manager, you may know certain things, like I'm just thinking as leading a team, like you may know certain things about a team member, but you're not going to share that with everybody. And that degree of empathy is not just from a leadership standpoint. I think that's anybody that you work with. You have no idea what's going on with them outside of the office hours, unless they share it.
Right.
And so it's just keeping that in mind, that you don't always know what's going on, and don't jump to the worst conclusions. There may be something else.
Right.
Definitely.
The biggest thing that I'm hearing you talk, Christina, is that separate from your mental illness, right, or whatever it is that each individually that we carry, there is an incredible amount of value that you as a person bring to your job, that you bring to your day, that you bring to your relationships, that is not negated because you have a bad afternoon or you have a bad week. That value that you provide, that you share with the world, is something that should not be overlooked simply because you have a label. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think the one thing that I always tell myself, and I try to remind myself, is I have a mental illness, but I am not my mental illness.
Right.
I am so much more than that. And so that was a really big thing. That was a really hard thing for me to remember. But I think if you're someone who's going through it, just try to remind yourself of that. Like, you are not your mental illness. You have one, but you are not it. And you are so much more than that. And that has been a really freeing thing for me to remind myself of, that I can still be passionate about this stuff. I can still talk about it, but I have so many other things to offer, and I can be a kick-ass employee regardless of what I'm going through.
She's also a crazy Harry Potter fan. So when I started watching Harry Potter, I was able to connect with her on that. So that was, I'm pretty sure your mug, does it have his glasses on it?
Yes, it is. It's a Harry Potter one.
Oh my gosh. I love it.
I think the other piece that would be really valuable, Christina, is what resources are your favorite go-to places that you rather consume content or read a blog, or what are places that you can share with our audience who want to know more about this?
I think my absolute favorite resource, and this is a resource that I actually credit for saving my life when I was a teenager. It's called To Write Love on Her Arms, and it's a nonprofit dedicated toward raising awareness about mental health and sharing the stories of people who are going through it. And their blog has been insanely valuable to me, because it's not like a lot of blogs out there, they share statistics about mental illness and they're very professional, but this is real people with real stories sharing what they're really going through. And I know when you're in the depths of, your mental illness, you feel like you're alone. You feel like you're the only person going through it, no matter how much that that's not true. Like, you still feel it. And being able to read those stories and relate to it and read those messages of hope and recovery has absolutely changed my life. And I found them, I think it was like 2006, around there. On MySpace, nonetheless. And it has been, it was crazy. Like, it popped up on like a suggested thing, and I was like, what is this? And it has been a lifesaver for me. And there's a ton of great resources out there, don't get me wrong, but I think that is my number one, and they can actually direct you to a lot of other resources as well. For finding a therapist or a psychiatrist, or just learning more about what you're going through. So that would be like my number one suggestion for sure.
Can you repeat that again for our audience?
It's called To Write Love on Her Arms.
to write love on her arms. We'll
Yes.
link that up in Facebook as well, and leave that in our show notes.
In the Facebook.
In the Facebook. Are we also going to put it on the Twitter?
Twitter and the Insta.
And you can also find MarketHer on the Facebook, the Twitter, the Insta, and the Snapchat as well.
Yes. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
Yes, make fun of me all you want.
Christina, thank you so much. I mean, the bravery and courage that it takes to even share with your boss and then to share with a broader audience is enormous. And I, for one, am so incredibly proud and thankful to have known you, and our legacy together lives on every single day when I'm now leading my team. So thank you so much for all that you have to offer the world and what you shared with our audience today.
Yes, and good luck with your blog. We hope that it goes well and can save some lives, just like that website saved yours. So we're really looking forward to continuing to follow you and watching you continue to grow. And if you have any other resources you want to share with us later that you may have missed today, we'll be certain to go ahead and share that with you or with everybody.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I seriously really appreciate it. I love talking about this, even though it's such like a controversial topic. It has such a stigma. I love being able to share my story because I know that's what saved me, and I only hope that it can help someone else too.
Awesome.
Thank you. Great note to end on.
Yes.
I feel like we should have you be our honorary tagline person. Do you want to say "you heard"?
Just say "you heard."
Yeah.
Ready?
You heard.
We listened.
Now go MarketHer.
Bye, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.